If you're in the final stages of your qualitative PhD and you're writing your discussion chapter, you might be thinking to yourself, I've done literal years of work, but I still can't explain what it means. Don't worry, this video's for you. One of the deepest fears that a lot of people experience when they're working on their discussion chapter is, does this actually add up to something coherent and something defensible? And usually the problem is that you're trying to turn your findings into meaning whilst you're still trying to make sense of your findings yourself. It can be a bit like trying to explain a complicated television series to someone whilst you're only halfway through watching it yourself. You know some of the important things that have happened, you can explain the key characters, the key scenes, but you can't yet fully explain what the bigger story is, where everything's going, and how all the pieces connect together. As a PhD researcher coming towards the end of your doctoral journey, you're probably putting quite a lot of pressure on yourself. You're expecting yourself to be able to explain the entire meaning of all of your research in the discussion chapter whilst you're still intellectually processing it. In this video, I'm going to talk about why this happens, why it feels so difficult, and how to think about the move from findings to meaning in a much calmer way. Let's get into it. You might be thinking, if I was doing this properly, surely I would know what my argument is by now. I would know what the big picture looks like. No. In qualitative doctoral work, coherence is very often assembled retrospectively. This is one of the most important things that nobody really explains to you. We often imagine that a good PhD researcher should just know what everything means immediately. They have perfectly stable arguments and they move really neatly from findings to conclusion in a lovely neat line. Usually, that is not what happens at all. In qualitative research especially, you often rethink your frameworks really late on in the process. You revise earlier chapters and you discover what your arguments are by doing the writing. You don't have to wait until you're certain in your head of what those arguments are. You need to write to get to them. And you will repeatedly restructure things as your understanding develops. It feels messy because it is messy, because it is supposed to be messy. It's a bit like tipping a huge jigsaw puzzle onto a table. At first, all you can really see are the individual pieces. You know that there's a picture in there somewhere, but you don't quite know what it looks like. Yeah, that's the PhD discussion chapter. This can feel really difficult because previous parts of the PhD journey might have felt quite procedural, quite linear. The literature review, data collection, these things can often seem much clearer than what you're being asked to do in the discussion chapter, because when you were doing your literature review, when you were doing your data collection, you had to do things that were quite straightforward. Gather the literature, talk to the people. At this point, you're being asked to do something very different. You're developing a contribution to knowledge through your own interpretation. Interpretation can feel much more personal than just reporting findings. When you report the findings, it can feel like, well, here's what the people said. But when you're being asked to interpret the findings, you are stepping up to the plate as a scholar. You're saying, this matters, this connects, this suggests something. This helps us understand something a bit more clearly. That can feel a little bit scary because you're being asked to make your judgment visible. Quick question for you before we go any further. If you're currently at the writing up stage, what part of that work feels the hardest right now? Connecting ideas, explaining your contribution, trusting your own judgment, structuring the chapter in a logical order, or just knowing where to begin? Let me know in the comments, because I think a lot of people watching this video will realise that they are a lot less alone than they think they are. And if you find these videos helpful and you want to support the channel, you can do so by clicking right here. One of the biggest misunderstandings about the PhD discussion chapter is that the most important thing is the structure. But when people are struggling with the discussion chapter, very often it's not about structure at all, even though they might think it is. It's actually about meaning. People come to me and say things like, I keep changing the structure. Everything feels disconnected. I can't explain what matters most, and I don't even really know what my argument is. What is really going on underneath all that is this. Your argument is still emerging. Let me show you what I mean. Let's imagine that your research involved interviewing first-generation university students about belonging. Now, at first, your themes might look quite separate from each other. Feeling out of place socially, hiding financial difficulties, struggling with academic confidence, feeling the pressure to fit in. Now, initially, they look quite disconnected, and you can describe each theme individually, but you might not feel all that clear about what the thesis is actually arguing overall. And then, while you're writing, you suddenly realise something, that this thesis is not simply about belonging. It's actually about the emotional labour involved in trying to appear legitimate within academic spaces. So, your argument starts to emerge, that the experience of belonging is shaped not just by participation in university life, but by the ongoing effort to appear academically and socially legitimate within spaces that often feel familiar. So those findings, those themes, those are your jigsaw puzzle pieces. And the argument is the picture that emerges when you connect them together. Moving from findings to meaning. What does that actually involve? I think a useful way to think about this is that findings tell us what is happening. The discussion, on the other hand, is about asking these questions. What might this mean? Why might this matter? What connects these ideas together? What broader argument is beginning to emerge? You are moving from themes to interpretation, from patterns to significance, from fragments to coherence. And this process is normally much more iterative than people expect. You might begin writing and you'll be absolutely convinced in your mind that one of your themes is really central. Then you start writing and you suddenly realise, actually, no, this other thing is what connects everything together. It's not what I originally thought it was. Or you might realise that what initially looked like completely separate things are actually different expressions of the same underlying tension. As I alluded to earlier, this kind of realisation often happens through the act of writing itself, not before it. You need to write badly, scrappily, messily, in order to get to the coherence, in order to get to what is really going on. And this is why so many people feel that they are going in circles at the end of the PhD, and they think that this discovering things as they write and then looping back and rethinking and restructuring and revising means that they've done something wrong, means that they've missed out something. It doesn't at all. This is all part of the process. This is all completely normal. As a PhD researcher, you've got to remember, you're studying the human experience, okay? And by its very nature, that is messy, it's complex, it's contradictory, it goes around in circles itself. So your process of making sense of that is not going to be linear and logical, okay? Your process of making sense of it is going to mirror that. It's going to be full of loops and backtracking and thinking things through again. Perfectly fine. If your discussion chapter currently feels a bit of a mess or a lot of a mess, it means that you are still doing the difficult intellectual work of making sense of what's going on, and it hasn't all quite come together yet. In many ways, the end of the PhD journey is often a bit like standing too close to a painting. When you are inches away from it every single day, all you can really see are those individual brushstrokes, the textures, the lines, maybe even the little bits of paintbrush that got stuck in it. And when you are that close to it, it becomes very difficult to zoom out and see the bigger picture and see how all of the different parts of that painting are working together. The PhD researchers who I've seen cope best with the process of writing a discussion chapter are those that learn to be okay with zooming in and zooming out and doing that again and again and again. Look at the detail and then step back and think, okay, what does that mean? How does that fit with everything else? And that is going to feel a bit uncertain and a bit jumbled, because the confusion here is a necessary part of the process. And one of the things that I've noticed in the 20 years that I've been supporting people through this stage of the journey is that when they feel confused, they automatically think that they're doing something wrong, that they shouldn't be confused, that everything should be clear all the time. And actually, it shouldn't. It shouldn't be clear all the time. Being confused is necessary, okay? Because being confused makes you think more deeply about it. It makes you think differently. It makes you consider alternative ways of looking at it. And that is how you get to the clarity on the other side. Nobody gets to skip the confusion part. We just need to get comfortable with it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, there's another one appearing on the screen right now that I think you'll also enjoy if you're in the closing stages of your PhD journey. Go and take a look. I'll see you in there.